Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kanchi Shah, and I head the EMEA business for strategy. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming you all to the third episode of the webinar series on proactive business resilience insights. I welcome you on behalf of Dell Technologies, F1 Infotech, and Strategic. Ladies and gentlemen, the world in which we live is changing, and the threats we face seem to be growing both in volume and complexity. Each day, we grow more connected in terms of technology, economics, and infrastructure than we've ever been in the past. While natural disasters often grab headlines, human caused events can also have widespread consequences. Because these crises and the disruptions are so deeply linked with the very nature of business we conduct and how we pursue them, it has become increasingly important to view risks as more intrinsic and ubiquitous than exceptional. They're no longer once in lifetime concerns. In other words, risks are a part of the spectrum of operational factors that organizations now are being built upon. To encompass those factors means focusing on not just recovery, but also agility and the ever greater resilience so as to reduce the impact of events and speed up response. Let's begin with our first session for the day, which is a discussion on the future of enterprise business resilience. Joining us on this session, we have Mr. Manish Tiwari, who's the Senior Vice President and Global CISO at Airtel, who's in a conversation with Mr. Amit Dhawan, CISO and DPO, Birlasoft. I'd now like to hand over the session to Amit. Over to you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. There is an old saying that one needs to prepare for the worst and pray for the best. And we all hope that things will go perfectly fine. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Things don't happen that way. Unfortunately, we live in a real world. So business leaders in all organizations need to proactively plan for disruptions to their day-to-day businesses and operations. The potential impact could be minimal, could be just a few applications not running. But in a lot of cases, it could be life-threatening and even cataclysmic. One of the major threats and impacts these days is the cyber risk. And these stakes continue to rise. Could be due to the greater digital dependency that we have, the new technologies of cloud, increasing regulation, IoT, 5G, to name a few. A lot of digital transformations happening, and there are a lot of change which has been triggered because of COVID. Further, the organizations are now joined together in massive ecosystems with their customers, with their partners, with their vendors, and just one slip in one of these spokes and the whole organization can come crashing down. Cyber resiliency, therefore, has been is the most important facet of today. It is a strategy. It is a combination of cybersecurity standards, guidelines, people, business processes, and technologies, but most importantly, a culture within an organization. It is a point of focus and emphasizes what happens when cybersecurity measures fail, as in when these systems are disrupted, which could be due to human error, unforeseen outages, or any such thing. So today we are going to discuss something about cyber resiliency with a very, very close friend, a very old friend of mine, Mr. Manish Tiwari, Senior Vice President and Global Chief Information Security Officer of Bharti Airtel. Good morning, sir, and welcome to this discussion.
Hi, Amit, and thank you so much for having me.
So, sir, you've been leading one of the largest telecom providers in the country, and if I can say, one of the largest in the world as well. And you have a huge amount of technology integrations, the newer improvements in technology that you're going to do and a lot of information and the regulations that are there on privacy, etc., being managed globally. So how do you identify this information and the security vulnerabilities together and associate the two in your organization? Do you use any framework? Do you use any guidance, etc., on this?
So Amit, like any very large and complicated organizations, I have always been a firm believer that look, one, of course, you're aware, telecom along with banking are one of the most regulated industries in the country. We are also part of the critical information infrastructure of the country, and hence this is not just about how to keep the organization safe and address its resiliency or business continuity. This can also impact in how to keep the country going. Like during the peak COVID time, our motto was how how do we contribute to help the country going? How do we keep Airtel going? And how do you grow Airtel comes later. The most important thing was at the worst of peak pandemic period was how do you ensure and you keep the lights on, right? So I think as a telecom player and post consolidation now, there are very few players left. Between us, we actually manage the entire telecommunications of the country. So any disruption in our operations beyond what I would say is acceptable or routine would very, very severely disrupt the country per se. And so one is that look, accept the fact that you're absolutely right. It's a complicated infrastructure. It's not a perfect environment. It's constantly growing. Old technology is moving out. Some perhaps hanging around more than they should, because transition takes time, like any organization, and new technology is coming in, and hence this whole aspect of the cyber risk landscape constantly changing and evolving, not just in the world of IT, but also in the world of telecom. So here we basically keep we have our feet planted on two distinct sides which are rapidly converging and which will increasingly converge with 5G. But that's what it is. So the first and foremost principle is that look, you have to have a very, very effective risk assessment and risk identification strategy, which is the overall risk management process is taken very, very seriously, because there is no other way. So in small organizations, for any big or small organization, it is the only proactive way to identify and manage risks, right? But in a large organization, there is no other way, and it has to be done very, very seriously because you can't even change things overnight. So things have to be planned, and things have to be implemented, and this exercise is done and undertaken very, very religiously. The other is that don't try to reinvent the wheel. You have global standards. If I may just mention a few which are the foundational standards, is you have the ISMS BCMS, you have the 27001, you have the 22301, and the advantage of undergoing not only an ISMS but basically an ISMS BCMS, addressing your BCMS as per global open standards, is also that this is a high level standard which actually helps integrate other ISO management systems and standards, whether you have 27001, ISO 9001, or etc., etc. So you are able to look at IT risks, not just at IT risks, but you look at the overall business landscape, because today, because of convergence, IT and business operations are fully integrated. So the two cannot be spoken in isolation of each other, and hence it is no longer an IT resilience standard. It is a business continuity aspect, because you are constantly evaluating the possible the possible impact on business in case something were to go wrong. And this is a constant activity which keeps going on. So you keep reviewing your whilst you undergo an audit on a yearly basis. It also leads to a certification. Having said so, certification is no guarantee that things on ground are perfect. At the end of the day, the certification only helps you steer in a direction and to ensure that you have achieved a baseline. Thereafter, the entire heavy lifting and implementation has to be done on ground. And that's a constant process, and there is a dedicated team for that. So that is how any large organization, including Bharti Airtel, look at not just the whole cyber risk landscape and business continuity, not just from an IT perspective, but also basically from an overall business operations and impact perspective.
Fantastic, sir. So, a very, very great perspective. And if I may quote something from what you mentioned and amplify probably, uh, the 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 thin line between compliance and security assurance is changing. It is no longer there, and compliance does not assure security assurance. So,
Yes.
what you mentioned is right. It sets a baseline, and from there you need to work more harder towards assuring security. Uh, Completely agree that you are part of national critical infrastructure, and in case of a national emergency, telecom is one of the most important thing, as probably as important as the armed forces for things to run. And with the newer wars being fought on the cyber domain, it becomes really crucial. And so I'll take it from here that with the importance that you have uh, on managing the infrastructure and a huge amount of technology changes that you're going through, cloud, 5G integrations, how does that impact or work on your protection strategy? It needs to be sometimes agile. I know it's a big organization, changes are difficult, but how do you define your protection strategy, define your safeguards? Do you ever work on low hanging fruit for plugging something, or it's all planned in a long process based thing?
No, I think Amit, it's a very very difficult question that you asked. But being brutally honest, there is nothing called low hanging fruits. And whilst you plan a lot because you need to, particularly if you're planning to replace a technology or you're planning to make some major changes, which include architectural changes, it needs to be planned. You need to have planned downtimes. Like, for example, today, if some of our critical systems were to go down, you'll not be able to recharge your phone on time. Now that will impact you very drastically, right? Or imagine if some critical system were to go down and you're not able to access your broadband. Today connectivity, we are talking over an internet line. And on my side it is Airtel. I don't know which is the line that you're using. I hope it is Airtel.
Same. It is Airtel.
Both of us are using an Airtel line. Now, can you imagine if we give a service which is very, very, which keeps getting disrupted? Internet has become a lifeline. So things need to be planned. There is no doubt about it. But you can be rest assured that there are enough issues that come up that need to be urgently addressed. And they need to be, and yes, they are prioritized. And based on the threat and risk scenario, they are prioritized either for immediate or for relatively urgent action. But at the same time, enough thought goes into saying, okay, in case I were to do this a little later, then what are the compensating controls that need to go into play? So disruption to customer, because it can really really impact lives, is something which one has to be very cognizant of. But apart from that, why there are no low hanging fruits out here is that it's a very complicated and vast environment. And hence for what is low hanging fruit for me could become what is very complicated for me could be low hanging fruit for another organization. So but due to the nature of its complexity, things, whilst they have to be planned, at the same time you have to be agile enough and quick enough to identify that, look, in case there is something that needs urgent remediation, and then that really must be addressed on an urgent basis. So life is busy, but there is no easy way in managing risk in an environment which I consider to be literally a living, breathing environment, or an animal, if I may use the word. Yeah.
I think I'll just add to when you mentioned about the technology is part of it and the complexity. I've always been an advocate, and I've been pushing in my teams and my areas of influence that the security folks generally, the security people as well as the security vendors are always lagging behind the technology part of it. Whereas the first principles, have always remained the same.
Yeah.
So it is always good for the security folks as well as the vendors to stay connected with the business, look ahead, be part of the strategy, and identify what are the areas that need to be plugged in. So and I'll take it on from this. Uh, being such a critical organization, you must definitely be under a lot of attacks, some publicized and not publicized, and anything that happens wrong is a will impact the country and not the organization and not the business. So how do you develop and implement systems for cyber attacks? How do you identify anything special that you do apart from
Yeah.
what the rest of the world does?
So look, when you are in a network environment and when you are in the public domain, cyber risk is a foregone conclusion. It's a ground reality. Get used to it. It's going on 24/7 in the on the open internet. Eventually, you do have for being relevant to your customers and for business as well as productivity. You have to basically you have internet facing systems. So your IT security strategy has to be based on the fact that it is not a perfect environment, and hence you have to be very vigilant, and considering the fact that you are also looking at 0 days as well as APT level attacks. There is no silver bullet, as we love to say, and there is no easy path. And hence, what is it that predominantly our approach and our strategy is? So first and foremost, we have put a lot of we put a and Amit, in the armed forces, we used to say, look, the machine is important, but the man behind the machine, and now man or the woman behind the machine, is even more important. And despite the fact that you have AI, ML going, I think this fact is not going away for a very long time. So 4 years back, we started this whole transformation journey on managing how to better manage risk. We started with complete insourcing. We developed our own teams. We set up this whole concept of red team, threat hunting, and increasingly using a combination of tools. But one of the basic premises, and I will go back to your last comment before you pose this question, was the challenges that CISOs and CIOs face today. And this is particularly on the OEM and the vendor side, right? See, I think it's very important for the industry to understand that nobody is looking for products anymore. People are looking for solutions. I mean, even if you are bringing on a product, because at the end of the day, all solutions are based on products, right? It may be a combination, it may be a single or a combination of a few products, but it's very important for conversations to have a solution mindset rather than a product mindset. The second is that, and I see this a lot in the partner ecosystem, the vendor ecosystem, they really need to understand the ecosystem of the customer, because one size shoe doesn't fit all. And thirdly, and this is something which I keep telling our cybersecurity community. I said, look, we are not living on Mars, and we can't work in isolation. Cyber security exists because of cyber and IT and digital, and not the other way around, which means that when we are trying to figure out a cybersecurity strategy for our organization, we have to seek alignment with business. It has to be an enabler for business. So in that sense, if this approach is not followed, if we don't understand our business, we are not aligned for business, we may come up with a wonderful cybersecurity strategy, but it may benefit nobody in the company, and hence it is useless. So the point I'm basically trying to make is that, be an enabler and not a blocker. So are you a part? So the point is, and I always love to say this, and I know you're going to hear this once again after so many years. My question to the whole, are you part of the solution or are you part of the problem? So if you're part of the solution, then please work with a solutions mindset. Please keep business enablement in mind when you talk about managing cyber risks. And please don't forget, the whole risk management exercise is primarily aimed at finding the right balance between business requirements and managing cyber risks. One without the other is absolutely ineffective and useless. So this is the agenda, this is the philosophy that we follow. And yes, we have adopted new age technologies. We keep change, where required. We are very agile in changing technologies. And despite a large organization, the advantage of having a very process driven as well as a very structured team with amazing talent is the fact that tomorrow, if you have to change technology, I can very proudly say it takes us more time to procure than it actually takes us to implement. We are quite agile overall. And don't get me wrong, the whole process of procurement is, you're doing POCs, then, negotiation, which is done by the relevant team. But once that is done and dusted, we have done our homework in such a way that from the time go, our implementation of that technology stack or replacement of an existing technology does not take time. So that is the advantage of ensuring you have the right people, the right structure of teams, as well as a very process driven organization within the company.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. One last quick question. I think we're running out of time. I understand that the culture setup in the teams is very, very important. How do you take that culture and build it into the resiliency plan, and how do you look after the services affected? How do you bring them back? Just a quick
Yeah. So okay, let me rephrase the question so that probably the answer is even better. I think the best example is how prepared was the world when the pandemic hit us. And the answer is, on a scale of 0 to 10, not, I would, so if I were to say 0, you can be rest assured I am being very generous. And I'm, how do you, it's not about companies. If you look at a global level, some of them, which are the organizations which have the maximum resources available to, they can move earth, they can move mountains, and that is governments across the world. And there are very, very powerful countries, advanced nations, and I think it is there for all to see as to, the pandemic caught everybody unprepared. Now, private organizations and companies are no different. Fortunately, I mentioned that in our organization, we do have, it's a very process-driven organization. We have a ISMS and BCMS policy. We have an audit which actually happens, but you will be surprised to hear that we did have a plan around the pandemic. Why? Because we are spread all across the country, right? We had as part of our disaster recovery, and there is some problem or the other happening in some parts of the country at any given time. It could be a law and order situation in one place. It could be a cyclone in another. It could be floods in another. So the organization is quite geared up to basically address emergencies on a sectoral basis. And incidentally, we also had something around the pandemic. However, there was nothing which would have addressed a plan that could have addressed everything happening simultaneously all across the country. Now, please don't forget that in addition to the peak pandemic, and the pandemic crisis is still not over, it's been going up and down in cycles, with two peaks now, peaks that we have experienced in the last 1.5 years. Please don't forget that last year we had two very, very secure cyclones as well. We had one on the Bombay on the west coast,
western coast, one on the east coast.
Yeah, and then we had one on in the last 1.5 years, we've had a very severe cyclone in the West Bengal, Orissa region on the eastern coast. And they both were extremely disruptive. I mean, fibers got washed away, they got cut. A lot of towers, mobile towers got, either washed away or they got destroyed or very badly damaged. So what I'm basically saying is that we literally had to go back to the drawing board. We had to, this was not just from a technology perspective. In a span of 15 days, early March, we had to get, on an average, we would have not more than 3 to 4,000 people using VPN or VDI. We had to push this to 55,000 in just 2 weeks flat, which means we had to scale up on our infrastructure capacity, and also the fact on the bandwidth or the connectivity, because then we would have 55,000 people, most of them connecting almost at the same time. So the infrastructure had to be gathered for that, right? And we had to enable practically everybody other than the minimum hands and feet on ground to be able to work remotely. So business resilient literally starts with that, because your day and night operations, which are so critical to monitoring services, had to be done from home, right? Finance team, I mean, these are still white collar jobs. I'm talking about your NOC, your SOC, your network support group, your network monitoring group. Everything had to basically move from the safety of, and then people had to get used to the idea to be able to collaborate online, to be able to use tools like Zoom. Now, a lot of white collar people are, but a lot of other people are not so conversant.
I think we are running out of time. So thanks a lot for your views, sir. It has been, as always, it has been an amazing conversation. And thanks a lot for all your insights, and wishing you all the very best in continuing this journey on with Bharti Airtel. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, you too, and all the best. And thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Manish and Amit, for that engaging conversation. With that, we now move forward to our next session, which is a solutions showcase, where we're looking at simplifying vulnerability management. And to take us through this, I'd like to welcome Mr. Akhil Rainey, Chief Technology Officer at Strobes. Over to you, Akhil.
Hello everyone, my name is Akhil Rainey, and today I'm going to talk about the challenges in vulnerability management space, especially when we are dealing with vulnerabilities at scale. So firstly, let me give you a quick introduction on who I am and what I do. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Strobes. Before that, I was a Chief Technology Officer at vSecure App. So working at vSecure App, I got a chance to design security roadmaps for many large enterprise organizations, especially from banking, finance, and healthcare industries. While working with these organizations, what I've realized was the vulnerability management process was a bit too chaotic. What they used to do was run an SS scan, export those issues, track them on an Excel sheet, and figure out what vulnerabilities have to be patched first. This whole process was way too tiring and used to eat a lot of IT and SecOps team's time. Well, this definitely cannot scale, and there is a high chance that we miss out on fixing a lot of immediate risks. What we actually need is vulnerabilities, assets along with their context, and threat context. Now let me explain each of this in an easier way. Assets and their context. Assets can be anything like endpoints, servers, applications, routers, cloud services, cloud accounts, and more. And when I say context, I basically mean the meta information that tags along with that assets. Do the assets hold PII information? Does the asset belong to HR department, sales department, or any other department in general? Are they publicly available or exposed? And so on. And coming to vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are those that we get from a typical vulnerability scan or a pen test on the assets that we give as a scope. Usually these vulnerabilities are presented with a CVSS scoring or a severity that typically is hard-coded within the vulnerability scanner and does not have any understanding of asset context or asset sensitivity. So when a vulnerability that says RCE comes along probably with a CVSS scoring of 8 or 9 without actually understanding the asset context. Third thing, threat context and indicators. So most of the vulnerabilities are related to software or OEM, and these vulnerabilities are tagged along with CVEs, which we call as an indicator. Now, like I said earlier, a vulnerability comes with a severity or a CVE stack, but does not take into account if a vulnerability has a malware attached to it, if it's a 0-day, if it's been used for ransomware, if it's been actively exploited, and so on. Now the best part. Now if we aggregate and correlate these three things, we would get a better view and priority on what to fix first. So let me give you a couple of examples. So for example, if you know a vulnerability is being actively exploited, but is in an asset with just static data, you can park it aside for a couple of days. Whereas a same vulnerability, if it's inside a critical with PI information, I would want that to be closed overnight or maybe even in the next couple of hours. To do this kind of aggregation and correlation, I 100% believe that there is a need for a platform. So we as engineers are working day in and day out to build a platform that solves this exact issue. Now that we know the challenges and problems, let's deep dive into the platform. I know your first impression looking at the screen is like, wow. Well, this is Stropes, a risk-centered vulnerability management platform that makes VM faster and saves a lot of time for SecOps and IT teams. What you're looking at is an organization list. Stropes was designed to help a CISO from a large organization or even SMBs. For example, a large bank CISO can manage all their subsidiaries and business units from one single place. Let's open an organization and explore what Stropes has to provide. After clicking on our organization, we land on an overview page where we get to know some quick information about the entire org. The first thing we need for Stropes to work is assets. Like I mentioned previously, assets can be endpoints, servers, cloud accounts, web, or mobile applications. Stropes supports adding and segregating them all. To create an asset inside the platform, you can do it in multiple ways. You can create an asset manually. You can import assets using different connectors like AWS Asset Inventory, Nessus, or even Expose. If that doesn't work for you, you can even import a CSV into the platform. Once we have assets in place, you can manage assets at scale. The platform is powered by GraphQL and query language. You can manage assets by the data table or programmatically use our API clients. For example, want to know what are the critical assets? Just add a filter with business sensitivity as critical and you can get to know all the assets that are critical. The use cases of using query language are infinite. Now that we have assets in place, it's time to configure continuous scanning on those assets or to even import vulnerabilities. The platform integrates with a variety of tools, vulnerability scanners, and more. We support DAS scanners, SAS scanners that also include software composition analysis, container scanners, infrastructure scanners, and even cloud configuration scanners. As of now, we have close to 45 integrations which are powered by an integration framework we built at the backend. This framework allows us to seamlessly bring in new integration as and when required. On an average, we can take about 7 to 12 odd days to build an integration. Using integrations, doing the scanning is pretty easy. For example, you want to import a Nessus report. To do that, head over to Import Connectors, select the required options, choose the Nessus report that you want to import, and click Submit. All the assets and vulnerabilities will be ingested into the platform. The other use case is continuously scanning a code repository for vulnerabilities. Well, we have many open source scanners inbuilt into the platform with CI/CD capabilities. To do that, pick up your favorite scanner, select the repository you want to scan, and configure the other settings that are required. Schedule a scan and click Submit. This will give you the ability to get continuous feedback in the form of risk in those repositories. Now that we figured out how to import and continuously set up scans using different scanners and for different assets, let's head over to vulnerabilities page to manage them. Again, the vulnerabilities page is powered by a data table, GraphQL, and query language. The vulnerabilities which are ingested within the platform are also enriched with threat intel based on CVE indicators. So for example, a vulnerability that has a CVE will be enriched with exploits, threat indicators, malwares, ransomware, 0 days, and more. The threat intel consumed by the platform is homegrown, and we scrap data from various public plus private threat intel feeds. The secret sauce of the platform is how the vulnerabilities, threat context, asset context are correlated to give a platform unique score called as priority score. For example, vulnerabilities with exploit available that are actively being exploited in a critical asset are given higher priority than a vulnerability with no exploit in a non-sensitivity asset. This way, you'll get to know what vulnerabilities to fix first. With the help of priority scores and query language, we can manage vulnerabilities faster. Let's say your IT team wants to know what are the top most critical vulnerabilities they need to patch first. Head over to the filters, select the exploit and priority filters, and click on Export CSV. They get a list of assets and they can move on to patching. Once they patched, they can come back to the platform anytime and move the state of those vulnerabilities to committed. A SecOps team on the other side can reconfirm on those and move them to resolved. A full VM cycle powered by Risk can be achieved like this. Stropes also offers various dashboards for CISO and other stakeholders to understand the risk of an organization at any point of the day, week, or month. We show the risk timeline, current risk score, state-wise vulnerabilities, priority-wise, and more. Well, it doesn't end here. Companies can also request for custom dashboards, and we would be able to achieve that easily. Now that we explored the features, let's talk about the deployment model of Stropes. Stropes was first designed to serve enterprise customers, so we designed the application as an on-premise solution. Later, looking at the traction from SMBs, we also created a multi-tenant SaaS, which is highly scalable. I hope you have enjoyed the demo. We are open for questions and queries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akhil, for taking us through that insightful presentation. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, is the poll question, and we request you to please cast your opinion for the same. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. With that, let's now move forward to our next segment, which is technology in motion. And to take us through this segment, I'd request Mr. Nitin Bhatia, Software Sales Manager, Data Protection Solutions India at Dell Technology, to join us. To moderate the session, I'd like to welcome Mr. Shantanu Ganguly, Chief Executive Officer, Strategy. Over to you, Nikhil and Shantanu.
Good day, everyone. This is Shantanu from Strategic. I am the CEO, and I'm delighted to welcome you back into today's webinar, Proactive Business Resilience Insights. As the subject says, this is something very, very interesting and relevant for all our businesses as we lead diverse technology functions in the business organization. In context of today and post the pandemic disruption that we have all gone through deep and intense, we realize all businesses rely on digital technologies, right? And in a perfect world, the organization systems would run without problems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and across 365 days in a year. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, right? Disruptions do happen, and as and when they happen, it is the business organization's ability to carry on and continue with their critical operations in the face of that adversity, which defines the resiliency of systems, resiliency of the business. And that's where this proactive resilience and this whole concept is of critical importance ever than before now, and definitely into the future. To tell us more on this topic and to share highlights of technology in motion, I'm delighted to invite in this conversation Nitin Bhatia, Software Sales Manager, Data Protection Solutions at Dell Technologies India. Hi Nitin, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our conversation.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Nitin, our audience today, who are primarily technology, security, decision makers, influencers, and practitioners, would be keen to hear from you how to plan and implement robust data security and then data risk mitigation strategies across the business enterprise, right? So, when it comes to reliable business resilience, what would be the top 3 value proposition or unique highlights from Dell Technologies DPS portfolio?
So, Shantanu, I think I'm going to be doing a step back on this first question, where it is important to know what are we trying to protect. So it first starts with understanding the value of information, understanding the value of data. And that is where the Dell Technology solution plays a vital role through our consulting services in identifying this information. What is the most critical mass that could get an organization out of business? Today, you're looking at different attacks, different types of attack, a mix of attack that happens when it comes to attackers, or I would say hacktivists acting towards your organization. Today, there are government-sponsored attacks. There are various means which takes your organization down. So the most critical part today is building up a cyber resilient architecture. And architecture matters is one important factor that we've been speaking to a lot of customers as an advisor. When we're building an architecture, there are 3 major parts to a cyber recovery architecture. One is making sure that it is isolated. Second, very important that it is immutable. And third, it is important that we are able to get as much information from it and make sure that you are ready even after you recover for a lot of forensics to do. Why did this happen? More importantly, using technologies when it comes to our number 1 product, data domain, understanding the data even before it is hidden. That's the key USP that you can get from a Dell Technology solution from Dell DPS.
Excellent. And then, as you've rightly mentioned, defining that holistic architecture first, analyzing the type and nature of data, and then be able to correlate and measure possible business impact, and then sort of designing the mitigation strategy aligned to this holistic ecosystem or architecture centric approach, I think is the most scientific way of doing things so far as data protection and risk mitigation strategies are concerned. Now, Nitin, coming to a situation where we have all experienced that unforeseen adversities do happen, right? So we all went through a situation where majority of workforce were forced to either work from home, they couldn't turn up into their work premises, etc. So and disruptions each and every industry vertical experience through, some of them still going through in different levels of impact. So how soon and how best can a business recover should an unforeseen disruption happen? Towards that, from a solutioning standpoint, tell us some highlights.
So, Chandra, I'll just peel the onion and make sure that our audience gets the view of how do we recover when the cyber attack happens, right? It is when it comes to, we're talking about recovering from a 0-day situation, which means the impact to the organization is already happened. And the moment you have this solution implemented, we're talking about first making sure that we are getting you back into business by recovering the periphery applications which are dependent for your organization to come back. And I'll give you examples like an Active Directory information. That is the most important part for even your user to authenticate today when the recovery has to happen. More importantly, we are targeting the backup workloads where we're making a copy of that information, keeping it secure, as I said, in an isolated environment, and making a immutable copy of it. So once the immutable copy is there, you are sure of that in the cyber recovery vault, your data is sanitized enough to make sure it is recoverable. So now you have a copy of data which can be recovered, which can be accessed, even whatever goes wrong with the organization. So from a recovery standpoint, once you sanitized your environment, this information is readily available for you in the vault. And it is about as good as storing a copy of the information from your backup, which is lying in the vault in isolation with the intelligence. So it can happen in minutes. It depends on the quantity of data that you need to get back. And we've had recoveries within a day where people have been back to operations, day-to-day operations, at least from a core platform where they can start doing their invoices, billings, and each data is identified differently.
Excellent. That whole concept of a cyber recovery vault and an immutable copy of data is something which is very, very powerful and so very relevant, especially when we all take into context the volume of targeted attacks, ransomware kind of attacks, which are becoming so very common even for business organizations these days, right? So one really needs to plan proactively and be forward looking in terms of anticipating those, and then be ready from a people, process, technology standpoint. So Nitin, while you have touched upon already on these, but if you could elaborate a bit on the data integrity and the security aspects of the cyber recovery vault solution or similar solutions that you spoke about, because it is not only important to recover the volumes of data which we want to leverage, but also with as much precise levels of accuracy and with I would say impenetrable or impregnable security, right? So if you could emphasize how that is taken care of, leveraging maybe artificial intelligence or as much human intervention free automation.
Sure. So, Chandra, I'll put this into 3 categories right now. Okay. When we speak to our customers, this is something that I have been always prominently educating them with, saying cyber resilience is a wall that you will try and build. As much amount of entry points that you define is what your data security will be defining, right? So we already have the perimeters in place. We have DLPs, insider threat. So different threats, you need to implement different strategies. And more importantly, when we start a conversation and when, as I said, our consulting team helps you identify the data, but a lot number of times customers have this information at hand. I've had customers who've come back and said, Nitin, believe me, uh, I don't look at the most billing platform that is important, but if you could keep a copy of this formulas that we've developed in last so many years of our business, just keep this 10 terabyte of data secure. And that starts with the practice of good, better, and best. Okay, and I will categorize the solution into good, where we are talking about just keeping a copy of that information into an immutable uh, infrastructure on a disk platform which could recover fast, which means you know that the data is sanitized. There is not going to be any impact. This is the most critical heartbeat environment. You've done all your scannings around it. It just needs to be kept in a worm kind of a device, which is immutable, so that nothing can be written onto it. And that copy is maintained. So that's where the good starts. At Good, we've put technologies into our product. And I'll give you as a part of this conversation. A lot of times, as we're dealing with backup information, right? It is important that even the NTP clock tampering could impact the backup environment, right? I just need to move your attention off. I will change the clock of your devices and everything is being erased. It's self-destructive. Now, whether it's self-destructive, we've made sure that our technologies are in such a way that even after the access that has been with the administrator, he cannot range it between a day. It is few minutes that he can range into, but he cannot move to a day. Over and above that, we've had advancement into the technology where we're talking about a make-a-check model, which means a security officer and an administrator coming together can only delete information. So that's the next level of security into the vault itself. So it could start with the biometric access into the rack versus doing a maker-checker environment. And now this was elevation from good to a better kind of a situation, where you now have two people coming in together only for information. Now I'll come to the best part where we're talking about the intelligence. As I said, it is immutable, isolated, immutable, and then it is intelligence. So we have our OEM partner index engine, where we're using a product called as CyberSense, which doesn't do metadata search. A lot number of times, and I would not want to name people here, but people say, once I've done the search on my metadata, I am securing that my backup is readable. But believe me, if you get an intelligence of understanding that there has been a change in the way the data is written, there's been a large change, you are able to give a lot of information pre your attack to make sure that your data is secure. So the intelligence that we are talking about is AI driven, where we're talking about close to 1,000 plus ransomwares that we are analyzing and making sure that every information that lands in your vault is being looked upon. And over and above that, this is looked upon without even recovering your data, which means it is cost effective. Imagine an organization saying, I have 100 plus terabytes of information, which is going to convert into petabytes of information as backup. And that needs to be scanned and intelligence to be derived out of it. It is sheer time that we are against. Just to give you a context, up to 197 days is what an organization takes even to detect that they've been impacted. Now, imagine if all this data is available, petabytes of scan, what is that we're leading to? So these are the three pillars and three solutions that we're getting to the table as data protection division of Dell Technologies, making sure that the data is in a vault, it has the intelligence, and it can in a recoverable state.
Awesome, excellent. I think Nitin Bhatia, thank you for brilliantly summarizing unique highlights of data protection solution capabilities from Dell Technologies. As we wrap up this session for our audience, here is a quick tip I would want to leave you with on some of the points Nitin already shared, plus summarizing couple from my end, which are, say, top 5 common elements of how you develop a cyber resiliency blueprint. And it's more of a sort of broad guidelines of approach. So number one, Nitin already mentioned, identify your vital information and security vulnerabilities, right? So you first define your ecosystem, analyze what's more important versus less, where you have maximum business impact. And once you know that prioritized categorization, then you can decide upon the next steps. Secondly, once you know what to protect and in what category, you then decide about implementing the necessary safeguards, the proactive safeguards or preventive safeguards that you would use in terms of technology, in terms of processes, in terms of people and skills to protect critical infrastructure and services. Right? Number three, in spite of all the safeguards, we all face situations where disruptions do happen. So if a disruption or an attack actually happens and we experience it, how do we detect it? So there has to be a solid implementation of a detection system and our ability to assess, detect, and implement a timely response. That's number three, so that we try to contain it in the shortest possible time and minimize the impact to business. Fourth point is about creating a response plan. Again, more from a technology, people, process standpoint, with clearly defining roles and responsibilities, who will do what in time of a crisis or a disruption, while trying to minimize the business impact, because that advanced definition, a clear plan, and some training and regular review, some simulations, make sure that when an actual disruption and response situation occurs, your team works like a very well synchronized system, and then in reality you are able to contain the impact to business to as minimal as possible. And last but not the least, Nitin elaborated on these. How do you develop and implement a plan to restore any data or services affected by an attack? That's where the relevance of the cyber resiliency vault and then immutable copy of data, as all the intelligence Nitin spoke about, comes into relevance. So thank you, Nitin, for this short but very precise and crisp and high impact discussion. Truly appreciate you taking of time and sharing this knowledge and snippets of very compelling solution highlights with our audience. So while I sign off at this moment to our audience, don't go away. We'll be right back with the next session in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikhil and Shantanu, for that inspiring and engaging conversation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, is the next poll question, and we request you to please cast your opinion for this one as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Our next session, ladies and gentlemen, is titled Profile and Success. And through this session, we're going to hear the inputs of Mr. Manish Manocha, Director, F1 Infotech, who's in a conversation with Arjun Vishwanathan, Chief Research Officer, Strategy. Over to the both of you, Manish and Arjun.
Hello and welcome. I'm Arjun Vishwanathan and I'm going to be your host today. Our conversation today is with a very, very eminent industry leader who's got his hands elbow deep in technology. And we are fundamentally going to be speaking about how, in a global enterprise scenario that is perennially and perpetually vulnerable to threats and attacks, organizations are perhaps realizing that the need of the hour is more for solutions that provide for robust, automated threat prevention, detection, and response capabilities. Modern work and the digital workspace by itself demands an equally modern approach to enterprise data as well as cyber resilience. Solutions that therefore have AI and ML deeply embedded and infused into the very fabric of solutions are the clear mandates and the need of the hour. And to join me in conversations, please put your hands together to welcome none other than Mr. Manish Manocha, Honorary Director, F1 Infotech. Manish, welcome, sir, and immense delight to have you with us.
Thank you, Arjun. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Manish, I'm directly going to jump into it, which is fundamentally that you're looking at an industry scenario today where you have the rise of the digital workforce. On the other hand, you have the decomposition of the physical office space, as it were. And simultaneously, you're also seeing the convergence of human capital and technology kind of coming together in a confluence of sorts, such as is expected to provide vast impetus to innovation. But with innovation and with such radically changed realities, cyber resilience, continuity, and security become immensely far more important than ever traditionally thought about. How do you view this entire landscape from the spectrum that you have available into industry from your office? Manish Manocha.
There was a survey, so I would start with this, that in which 64% responded that their IT environments are getting more and more complex than what it used to be 2 years ago. Right? And the top reasons for increasing the complexity is increase in data volumes, then there's increase in number and types of endpoint devices which are getting into the organization. Then there is a need for using both private and public cloud, and there was more users on board coming in. So we all agree, right, that cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated now, and it's not a matter of if, rather it's a matter of when do we face such an attack. And also in 2015, there was a Sheltered Harbor initiative was taken, right? So which implements a standard to process and to protect the US consumer financial data. So likewise, more legal and regulatory trends are being introduced in India also. New compliances are coming, and also new cyber recovery. I mean, we understand that cyber recovery basically goes beyond the most of the disaster recovery plans now. A recovery from a destructive cyber attack is much different than the disaster recovery, what we have from the other disasters, like what we face is power outage, fire, flood, or any kind of similar event we have. So it is not the question of RTO or RPO now, but rather it is whether I can get my data back or not when I face a ransomware attack. So now coming to cyber resilience, if we refer to NIST cybersecurity framework, so it is not a solution, basically, it is the strategy which is to be implemented in organization. And cyber resilience is a strategy that incorporates people, process, and technology together. And so it gives a holistic framework and that protects an entire business, organization, or an entity. When I talk about cyber recovery solution, it is a very critical component of an overall cyber resilience strategy. And cyber recovery basically is based on two pillars. One is the protecting critical data from cyber threats. And second is whenever it is necessary, it should enable us the recovery of that data from an isolated environment. Now coming to cyber recovery solutions. So there are a few things what a solution should have. One, we talk about isolation, which is a physical or a logical separation of data. Then it should have immutability, which is the preservance of the data and the integrity of the data. And third is, which is most common, is intelligence, which should have ML or any kind of analytics deployed on that. So a cyber resilience to us is a strategy which is key to increase business agility, which improves the cloud economics, and it reduces the business risk. And this is how it becomes an integral part of comprehensive cybersecurity. Over to you.
It's very interesting, actually, and that's very powerfully articulated, Manish sir, because one of the things that I also wanted to, and while you were articulating, one of the couple of points that were going on in my mind, which I would like to place in front of you to hear your perspective, is the following. The first is definitely the overall cyber resilience solutions. How do you see that panning out in an industry today that is far, far more vulnerable than it ever was before because of the very sophisticated nature of either state-sponsored attacks that could be possible or independent actors or the dark web by itself? So that's one is, how do you see this panning out over the next couple of years to enable organizations to move forward more resolutely as well as more confidently? That's number one. And the second is, we understand that no amount of security is perhaps enough, but does one therefore sometimes, when looking at a very comprehensive security strategy, fall amiss of hindering innovation? Manish.
See, yeah, so it's very difficult to measure true cost of ransomware attack. Right? So I will start from here. One, there's a loss of revenue, there's a loss of productivity, then forensic starts, there are different procedures which are to be followed, and there's a different cost to it. Then there's a brand damage, which is basically an indirect monetary loss to an organization. Then there's a loss of reputation. So there are so many things which happens with the one single ransomware attack. So we wanted to come out with a service or solution which should be reliable and which should be in cyber data recovery, and it should deliver and perform when customer need it most. So there should be a solution we were looking at which should protect data and provide recovery across on-premises and multi-cloud environments. And we were trying to evaluate some solutions which would get or which would gel and fit into the cyber resilience strategy of our customers, and which should have a few features and it should have a good class of features which any cyber recovery solution should and must have. And then this is how we evaluated Dell CRS as also, and we found it really most promising. And this is how we join hands with.
Very interesting. Because one of the next questions that I also had for you, Manish, was how do you see CRS sit right in center of the overall digital transformation strategies that organizations today are mandated in a post-crisis resurgence of sorts? How do you see CRS solutions sitting right plonk in the middle of transformative journeys that organizations will undergo?
Any CRS solution, basically, when I talk about specifically to the cyber recovery and not the disaster recovery, it should get dealt with the cyber resilience strategy, right? And it has to start from the governance point of view. So there should be people involved into it, and there's a technology. So people portion anyway, the governance of the organization you take care of. They should have a cyber resilience strategy automatically, and if it is there in place. So we find this CRS basically being a very critical and crucial component of that strategy. It gets deployed, and it does not even, it's not only which gives them the security from the data from any of the ransomware attack, or rather the basic thing is that the data should be recovered successfully, and that's what we have tested so many times, that after the ransomware, the recovery becomes very crucial. So it's not that how fast you get the data. First of all, you should have an assurance that you can get the data back.
Indeed.
That's what, yes, we tell that.
Very interesting. And as we taper down, I do know, Manish, that you've had a long day and you do have a long day ahead. Is from the perspective of F1 and considering that Indian industry's needs today stand radically changed from maybe about a couple of years back, even 18 months back, how do you approach the whole concept of delivering superior service excellence to your customers?
Uh, we have basically 4-point agenda to achieve the excellence in customers experience. One, we help them to build a strong, robust security culture. And so when I talk about strategies, the security is no more a product deployment or is a policy. Basically, it has become a culture within the organization. So because going from the traditional security to the cyber resilience, it requires a big mind shift. Right? It requires a mindset shift. Second is that we embrace the zero trust approach. We also know that pandemic has changed the world culture, work culture. Keeping location flexibility in mind, there are more and more technology coming in. People are working from home, and they are more exposed to the cyber attacks and to the internet. And this is how we take it that and we embrace the zero trust approach. Then we help in developing strategies that encompasses the data protection and how the response is there and how fast they can recover from any kind of cyber attack. And last but not the least, the 4 pillar what we have in our strategy is that we help them in monitoring compliances to avoid any further regulatory or statutory compliances, because being GDPR and other such compliances in the European world. So in India also there are so many other compliances which are coming in. So seeing that CRS, which would definitely take care one of the largest part of the penalties which can emerge or which can get from any kind of cyber attacks. So these are the these are the 4-point strategy. Would we start with the 4? So we assess, we observe, and we give we do the assessment and audits of the compliance policies. Come up if the new policies are required, any kind of new data protection policies required as per the new regulation coming in, and on the platform, on the framework that we fit in such kind of solution. This is how this is how we take our solution to the customer.
No, very, very interesting, because I think what's clearly emerged from your articulation as well as the narrative that you brought to this conversation is that as we progress towards more complex journeys of value acceleration, resurgence, and revival, I think business leaders as well as IT and security leaders must really align business priorities to evolving risk and security strategies. But, Manish, it was a delight speaking with you. Unfortunately, that's pretty much what we have time for in this segment. Thank you. It's been a privilege, sir.
Yes, it was really an end to talking to you, Arjun. And,
thank you so much.
Speaking with you.
Delighted. And for the audience, that was I, Arjun Viswanathan, your host, in conversation with Manish Manocha, Honorary Director, F1 Tech, on the whole concepts of cybersecurity, cyber resilience. Stay tuned with us and we'll be back with the next segment in just a moment.
Thank you very much, Manish. Thank you, Arjun. Thank you for sharing those gems of insight. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to a conclusion of today's proceedings and would like to thank all of you once again for joining us for today's episode of the webinar series on proactive business resilience insights. I thank you on behalf of Dell Technologies, F1 Infotech, and Strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to welcoming you at the next episode, which is scheduled for the 5th of October. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great day ahead.